You'll hear people get up on these stages and talk about how peptides are natural, safe. And I literally said in one of my talks, that's bullshit. It's that the way they're being marketed right now is certainly not useful and I think potentially dishonest. Fiction number 2 is that aging has been reversed. It's pretty safe to say we have never made an old person young again. So I'd propose that we have a drinking game here. Every time Brian says we measured biological age, you get to take a drink. And we'd all be hammered by the end of Brian's talk. I showed pictures of which have been presented deceptively. It was clearly designed to mislead people into believing something that isn't true.
All right, Matt, here we are again.
We are.
Yeah. So I think this should be the last of your sort of a little mini travel series we did. So you just got back.
This year, yeah.
This year,
I hope so.
Yeah. Because you said no more traveling in December, right?
Right. So, yeah. So it's been really pretty packed travel schedule since August or September. I feel like I've been on the road, 50+% of the time. The most recent couple of trips, I think where we left this series, this is a 3-part series now of Matt's travel experiences. I think where we left this was after the, Singapore, New York, Boston, Toronto, Albany.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds right.
Experience. Then I was back for a week and then went to Geneva for the Global Longevity Summit, which was the start of this most recent 3-week period in a few different continents. It was pretty fun. Global Longevity Summit was interesting. So that was a conference with more of a longevity medicine feel, I guess I would say. The theme of the meeting was mastering the aging clock, and they had this sort of graphic of this, futuristic looking cyborg guy with a clock, on his face. And a lot of it was about aging clocks, as you could imagine, but it was, sort of broadly about, advances in longevity medicine, much more clinical feel. It was, I think, co-sponsored or co-run by A4M, which is the American Association for Anti-Aging Medicine, which has been around the field for a long time. They've got sort of I guess I would say a mixed reputation among the scientific side of the field in that, they have put on a bunch of conferences, I think often in Vegas, on anti-aging medicine. And, for a long time, sort of had the reputation of just a bunch of docs prescribing growth hormone. I'm saying that from like the perspective of the scientific community, which obviously I'm a part of, but was, really that was my background, right? So I think if you ask a lot of the scientists in the field, they're going to have a pretty negative feel about A4M. And there are lots of doctors who have been, practicing anti-aging medicine for decades who have been part of A4M. So anyways, all of that's just to say my first experience ever being at a conference that was co-branded or co-organized or whatever by A4M. So it was a little bit different. It was sort of an interesting few days for sure.
One difference I noticed from this trip for your other ones is you seemed a lot more jet lagged when you got back from this time around.
Yeah, definitely this most recent one. So, but I think, it's interesting because I historically haven't had much trouble with jet lag. And these last few trips, I don't know if it's because, again, it's been sort of, constant for the past 3 months, or if it's just I'm getting older, who knows, maybe I'm not mega dosing creatine or whatever. Yeah. Definitely had a little bit more jet lag in Geneva. And so one of the things that I did on this trip that worked really well for me was every morning I'd wake up at like 3:30. No matter what time I went to bed, I'd get up, be wide awake at 3:30. And I just made the decision, okay, I'm just going to go to the gym in the hotel and work out. And I did that, and it was great. I had the gym all to myself. I could take as much time as I wanted. And so I'd go down and spend an hour and a half, do some cardio, do weights. It was nice because the hotel actually had a reasonable gym for resistance equipment. And so I think that's something I'm going to keep doing from here on out. It just worked really well. I felt great. Even though I was waking up early in the morning, I wasn't super tired during the day. So, I think I posted probably something on Instagram, from the gym, 3:30 in the morning. But yeah, I'm not sure why I've been experiencing as much jet lag as I have. And then, like you said, when I got back, which was, what is today, Friday. So yesterday, I woke up at 1 a.m., So I got back Wednesday about noon, I think, came into the office for a few hours and then went home and then woke up at 1 a.m. Thursday morning and I was just burnt yesterday. Yeah. I'm feeling better today. I got a solid 8 hours. And so hopefully my brain is working. But yeah, I don't know what it is. Hopefully, it won't be an ongoing thing. But I feel real good now. So I expect, I'm more or less back to my normal circadian rhythm.
What's a typical workout for you when you're traveling?
I mean, it totally depends on the quality of the gym, right?
This one looks pretty good by the photos.
Yeah, I mean, they had machines to do resistance training. None of the hotels that I've stayed at recently have like a full, free weight set or anything like that. But this one actually had machines. So it's kind of similar to what I do at home. I typically split, chest and tris together, back and bis together, and then fit legs in wherever. Sometimes I'll do a dedicated day, but when I'm traveling, usually all they have is like leg extension, leg curl. So I'll fit that in with either chest or back and split it up that way. And then, maybe I'll do 2 days on and then take a day off. But I just kind of go by how I feel. Then I usually do, I start, if I'm doing cardio and resistance training on the same day, which like when I'm traveling, I usually do because I don't have enough time to break anything up. I'll usually do like 20 minutes of zone 2 to warm up, do my weights. And then if I feel like doing something after that, do a different type of cardio. But a lot of times that'll be it.
All right. So what was the venue like?
Yeah. So the venue was great. It was so the hotel was right in Geneva, not too far from the airport. The venue is called this Genolier Innovation Hub, I think is what it's called. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Anyways, beautiful brand new facility. But it was like a 45-minute bus ride outside of Geneva. So every day, they made all the speakers get on a bus, bust us to this location. It was in sort of the hills, tiny town, going through these tiny little streets. I felt bad for the bus driver, but, So it was a fantastic venue, but, I've had this experience now a couple of times in recent conferences where, the conference center is a 45-minute drive from where you're staying. It's just really not a great experience, even if it's a really gorgeous venue. Like, I understand why the organizers do it. They want to, put the speakers up at a nice hotel. They want to have the venue be really nice, but it really, I think, just detracts from the experience. And I mean, the reality is it's like you're spending an hour and a half on a bus, right? You don't want to be doing that when you're at one of these conferences. So advice to conference organizers is, have the venue and the hotel right next to each other. It just works a lot better.
Yeah, the venue is so big. I feel like there's a hotel in there somewhere.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, and it was, like I said, it was a world-class facility. It just was very remote. So.
What were the style of talks like? Was it super deep scientific, more sort of, layman?
Yeah, it was pretty mixed. So this definitely had, as I mentioned before, it was co-organized by A4M. So it definitely had more of a alternative medicine feel to it, I guess I would say. So there were some real science talks. So the theme was around clocks. And so Steve Horvath was there, who's sort of, one of the people who pioneered the idea of aging clocks and particularly epigenetic clocks. He gave a very science-based talk, but a lot of the speakers were doctors working in the space. And so, those ranged from a couple of really good talks around lifestyle and nutrition. Then there was a lot on peptides and stem cells and exosomes, which is all interesting. I think where I struggle and where I'm still trying to really wrap my head around this space is those talks often are not at all data driven or evidence based. It's more somebody talking about what they do in their clinic and kind of giving pseudo case reports about how they've had patients, respond to this particular peptide or this particular stem cell therapy, but not actually showing any data. Maybe there's a video or a picture of somebody, who was, paralyzed and then suddenly is up walking around. I'm exaggerating, but it's that kind of stuff. And so for somebody who comes from a very scientific background, you look at that and you're like, this doesn't seem very convincing. It doesn't mean it's not real, but it's just not convincing from somebody who wants to see statistics and, things like that. So anyways, it's all to say, like, I'm not trying to be dismissive of peptides or stem cells or exosomes. Like, there's exciting biology there. Those things can have real effects for sure. All of this stuff has its place. But I think many people, myself included, would like to see more real data on side effects, efficacy, how many people have been tested and followed, what are the details of the experimental therapies that are being used. So it was sort of a mixed bag, I would say, from my perspective. And again, part of the value, I think, and part of the reason why I've been going to so many diverse types of events recently is so that I can really get a feel for, what's happening in the longevity ecosystem overall. Because again, my background comes from very, mostly academic, science-based sorts of approaches. And I would say the majority of what's happening out there in the real world right now is not that in the longevity space.
So our regular viewers know your opinion on clocks. So it's hard for me not to
I don't know if they do, actually.
Okay, well, we can go into it.
Because I say that because, I talk about clocks a lot of times when I give my own talks at the conferences. And I feel like people are not listening to the words that I say. It's like the take home that people come up and they're like, why don't you believe in clocks? I'm like, did you listen to my talk? I did not say that.
Yeah. You said to me, it's like they're a correlation of a correlation. That kind of stuff. The way you worded it stuck with me. So
yeah, I think, and again, I'm working on putting together like a dedicated episode on clocks so that hopefully people will get it. But I think the way I would frame it is, the clocks are an estimate of health, current health status, future health risk. They are correlated to something that is correlated to biological age. It doesn't mean they're not useful. They're really useful when done well. I think in the research world, they are extremely useful and getting more powerful. The problem is in the direct-to-consumer space, the clocks that people who are watching this are going to get access to, they're not useful at all because we don't have any information on how accurate they are. Like a test that you take, if you don't know how accurate it is not useful in any way. And so that's really the take-home message. But that doesn't mean the clocks don't work. It just means that the way they're being marketed right now is certainly not useful and I think potentially dishonest.
Yeah. So you're essentially saying that $100 reallocate that towards healthier food.
Don't waste your money on something that you don't have any way of knowing if it works.
Yeah, a gym membership or healthier food.
This really should be pretty obvious. Again, I think we talked about this before, but if you have a scale at home and you weigh, let's just say you weigh 180 pounds, right? And you get on the scale one day and it tells you weigh 90 pounds, and you got on the scale the next day and it tells you weigh 270 pounds. That's not useful.
Mm-hmm. It's
the same thing with these direct-to-consumer tests.
Yeah. It could be discouraging, right? Depending on where you're at. Or
it's nonsensical to even go there.
Yeah.
So anyways, all of that is to say that it obviously frustrates me that either I'm not communicating the problem with these things clearly, or people just are not paying attention. Like I don't know how else to do this. But even, when I give these talks at conferences, it feels like some people don't really get the important message. They just either hear clocks are great or clocks are crap, right? Depending on who the speaker is. And just pay attention.
Yeah. So I guess what was your talk about? Was it mainly this?
No. I think I touched on clocks. Okay. So the talk at this conference, was about certainly what we're doing at OptiSpan, sort of our vision for, scalable approaches to healthspan medicine. What does healthspan medicine mean? I did talk a little bit about some of the, I think, challenges in the space around, is longevity medicine, is that phrase already irreversibly damaged in some ways? And what can we do as a field to give people confidence that this is really rigorous, legitimate healthcare, right? So some of the challenges and opportunities. That's kind of the way I tried to frame it. And so I did talk about clocks. And again, it was basically what we just went over, that these things are estimates of health. They are correlated to biological age, or a correlation to biological age. They're really useful at the population level. They're telling us interesting things about the mechanisms of aging biology. And if you are a responsible clinician, you should not be using them in your clinic unless you have some sort of third party doing the analysis for you that is validated, right? So if you're using a direct consumer company, you are practicing bad medicine, basically was the message.
So how do you think your talks were received by the people there?
Yeah, I mean, I think well. One of the things I've known for many years is no matter how bad your talk is, and I don't think my talks are bad, but no matter how bad your talk is or how strongly people disagree with you, people will always come up to you afterwards and tell you how great your talk was.
Okay,
so I don't take it with a grain of salt. But having said that, I do think that in general it was received well. I did have several people, probably 6 or 7, which sort of surprised me, throughout the rest of the day, basically say thank you for standing up for science. I think, again, because of the sort of dichotomy between the grounded evidence-based approaches and the more sort of, fringe alternative medicine, I guess is a way to frame it. Certainly not mainstream medicine. I think because of that dichotomy, a lot of people who have a science background were uneasy at this conference, or at least with some of the talks. And so those were probably the people who came up to me and thanked me for, having a more evidence-based and scientific approach. So yeah, I think, again, it accomplished in some ways what I hope to accomplish. I think all you can do really is go and share your thoughts, and talk about, how we're approaching it. And I think a lot of people that will resonate with, some people it won't. And, we're trying to get the medical providers who want to do this kind of, rigorous evidence-based approach to healthspan medicine on board. That's really all we can hope to accomplish.
Right. So I saw this clip on your Instagram. I actually wanted to play it.
Yeah. This is a clip that Amy Killen sent me from the conference.
Should have good seat.
We need to do controlled studies. We need to have real science. We need to collect data to figure out what works, who does it work for, when does it work, what do the side effects really look like. If we're going to convince people that this is legitimate evidence-based care.
Yeah, I mean that's basically, I think, the take-home message I was trying to get across. And wow, I actually said it in a clear and concise way.
It was great. Yeah. All right. Anything out? Did you film any podcasts while you're traveling?
I did. So at the Geneva conference, I think I did 3 podcasts while I was there. So one was for the Healthspan Collective. So Nicole Doran emailed me, I think, before the conference and asked, she was going to have a podcast studio there, and asked if I would sit down and record a podcast with her. So I did. I don't think that's come out yet, but people can check it out if they want to. We covered a whole lot of stuff. It was a very diverse conversation around, lifestyle, science of longevity. Of course, talked a bit about rapamycin, some about Dog Aging Project, some about OptiSpan. So touched on a lot of topics. And then Julian Issa was there, and he had a podcast studio set up actually at the venue, and so ended up doing 1.5 episodes with him. So he asked if, I think originally he asked if I would sit down with Aubrey de Grey and Gordon Lautz. So Aubrey, probably everybody knows. Gordon is an expert in glycan biology, and really the guy who has pushed glycan biology forward as a biomarker of a whole bunch of different health conditions, but also of aging. Gordon's daughter and he started Glycan Age, which is the glycan test that is popular in the field. We've worked with a little bit at OptiSpan as well. So anyways, it was framed as a debate, and I sort of told Julian, like, Aubrey, Gordon, and I are going to agree on 90% of the stuff. So it's not really going to be a debate. But I think he felt like, well, debate is going to get people more interested. Yeah. So anyways, so we sat down, and so it was the three of us and him for a 4-way conversation, which was great. A lot of fun. That episode is actually out. And then he was doing a podcast recording with Andrea Mayer at Singapore, and I've known Andrea for many years. She's fantastic. And so anyways, I got there. They were running long, and so I got there at the time for our recording, and Julian was like, "Hey, come on in, and we'll do an impromptu sort of 3-way conversation." So I sat down with them for like 20 minutes, and we talked about stuff.
I don't think I've seen that. Is that out yet?
I don't think so.
I'll double check. I'm about halfway through this one, and I really liked it. It's definitely not a debate. It feels more like a friendly conversation, but Great.
Yeah. And I mean, again, Gordon and Aubrey, are both, great people. And like I said, we agree on 90% of the stuff.
Yes.
So I think it's one of these, it's one of these things where we have different perspectives. And so sometimes you can have interesting, you can have the conversation go in interesting directions you didn't expect by getting, people like us together.
Yeah. And shout out to Beyond Tomorrow's production design and everything. It's a really high quality studio.
It was a nice studio they had set up there. And I think they had 4 or 5 cameras and, it was a nice, again, part of it is this venue is really nice. And I think they are, that's built into the facility, right?
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. All right. So we're next, I think Chicago, right?
Right. Yeah. So I was in Geneva for 3 days and then flew to Chicago through Newark. I got stuck in Newark I should have known, God, never fly through Newark. But anyways, got stuck in Newark for, 4 hours or something, whether it was weather or, air traffic controller delays or something else. But eventually made it to Chicago late at night. And then I was there for a couple days for an event put on by Josh Black. The event was called Younger. And it was a really interesting event. So it wasn't, I don't know if it was open to the public or I don't know how he got the people who were attending there, but it was a series of panel discussions. So no formal talks, but a series of panel discussions, all sort of themed around different ideas related to, longevity. And so I think there were maybe 6 or 7 of us who were panelists in these different discussions. And each discussion was 20 minutes. So it was maybe a 2.5 hour event, in total.
Do you have a preference between panels or solo sort of talks?
Well, panels are easier.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I don't have to do any prep work, right? In fact, I mean, you know me. I don't know, our audience probably may have picked up on this, but I'm very comfortable winging it. And in fact, I like doing that because I think you're more likely to give honest answers if you haven't prepped. So I really I don't know if they are more or less valuable from a viewer perspective, but from just doing it, it's just way easier for me to sit down and do a panel. Having said that, I think the quality, the information density that you get if it's a well prepared, presentation is going to be higher because a lot of thought has gone into the presentation.
Okay. So on screen right now, we'll be showing all the other people on the panel with you. Any of them you knew beforehand or?
Yeah, so I knew Anar Isman before. I've known Anar for many years. He is the co-founder and CEO of Ageless RX. Great guy. And then I'd met Jeff Gladden before. Jeff runs his own clinic. I think he's a cardiologist by training, but he runs his own clinic in Texas. And so I didn't know him well, but I'd met him at, I think, a NA4LI event. And then I don't think I knew any of the other panelists other than Josh, who sort of was the host of the event before the event. It was cool. I mean, all seemed like great people. Really liked getting to meet the other panelists. It was, again, a pretty mixed crowd in terms of background and I think perspective on the space. Very much like the Geneva event from that perspective, where I probably was the most scientifically conservative, even though when you look at the scientific community in the longevity space, I almost certainly fall at the very liberal end, if we're talking about conservative and liberal, right? Yeah. In the sense that, I'm comfortable with the gray area. I see the value of experimental therapies. I just wish we had more data. But I think in this crowd, when you start getting into the alternative medicine community, all the way through to hardcore biohackers, all the way through to, the snake oil people at the far extreme, I'm pretty conservative in that sort of breadth of the landscape. So anyways, some of the other panelists were, they had their own clinics in, again, I don't know if alternative medicine is the right way to say it, but that's just the phrase that I'm going to use, so I don't have a better one. Some of them do stem cells regularly. Some of them do a lot of peptide work. And so some of them do a lot of cosmetic stuff. So it was a mixed set of perspectives, which is always interesting. And again, I sort of alluded to this earlier. I very much am trying to approach the breadth of this space through a lens of learning and curiosity. And so I think by talking to people, meeting them, understanding why they think the way they think, why they take the approaches that they take, helps me to kind of get a better feel for what's happening out there. And so from that perspective, it was really valuable. And like I said, all super great people. Like I really, really enjoyed meeting the other panelists, and it helps to be able to actually meet people, even if you don't agree with the approach that they're taking, or you don't think that they're evidence-based enough. You can get to know them and kind of get a better understanding of why they're doing what they're doing. I still will say, I don't really understand the perspective, and I'm not sure I ever will, because I view things through the lens of, and I don't mean this to be demeaning to other people who maybe don't, but I think I'm very critical in the way I think about things. I approach things through the lens of wanting to be convinced, wanting to see data, and not everybody does, right? And so I'm not sure I can ever relate to how a medical professional would be comfortable prescribing something based on word of mouth, which is a lot of what's happening out there, right? You go to these conferences, I sort of alluded to it earlier. There's no data presented. It's just, I did this and it worked. Great.
Yeah.
N of one. And how many times did you do it and it didn't work, right? Those are the things that come into my mind. But it feels like a lot of people in the space, if another doctor says they tried something and it worked, all of a sudden they feel comfortable using that. And so it's just a different culture, I think.
Yeah. I kind of want to give an example. So somebody who works here, her husband had a high A1C, and the primary care doc said, "Don't do anything. Don't worry about it." She helps him through OptiSpan method, lowered his A1C. He went back and he goes, "Hey, can I use you as a success story? Or can I use you as,
His doctor did.
Yeah, his doctor.
Yeah.
And then she was like, he had nothing to do with it. Why is he taking my credit? In my mind, I'm like, if he has 100 patients, he tells them all don't do anything or do X or whatever.
Yeah.
And then 5% make progress without nothing to do with him. He can highlight that 5%.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's almost the flip side, right, of doing nothing instead of doing something. But yeah, I think conceptually, sure. Right. Again, that's why in the scientific and academic clinical community, randomized clinical trials are the gold standard, because you have, at least in theory, all of the controls to know what works, what doesn't work. You can actually follow how many people experience side effects, how many people did the treatment work for. Unfortunately, in the alternative medicine space, with a lot of the things that people are using, we don't have that. And so, it's kind of like, how do we believe? Yeah. I mean, I've been noticing, I don't know if you've noticed this, I've been noticing, it feels like an exponential uptick in peptides, like hearing about like everybody's talking about peptides. There's so much nonsense out there, and misinformation. But it's sort of reached this, momentum where a lot of doctors who know nothing about peptides are just prescribing them out like candy, right? It's crazy. And so, in fact, at this event, and I think I've said this at Geneva as well, I mean, I think literally the words were, you'll hear people get up on these stages and talk about how peptides are natural and peptides are safe and peptides always work and there's no side effects. And I literally said in one of my talks, that's bullshit. Yeah. Like, some peptides are safe, some peptides are natural, some peptides work. They don't all fit into that category. And if you don't know which ones are in which category, it's irresponsible to be prescribing them to people, right? So I feel like, we're probably going to get to the point where FDA or some other regulatory body is going to have to step in and say, okay, this is getting too far. And, if you look through history, this is not the first time there have been these fads for alternative medical procedures. In fact, I was listening to a podcast recently and they were talking about, it's a history podcast, and they were talking about, I think it was in the 1920s, people were doing injections of monkey glands for longevity.
Wow. Yeah.
So this is not the first time that these sort of, alternative therapies have gotten to the point of ultra fad. And again, the problem is people are going to listen to what I just said and they're going to be like, Matt is an anti-peptide. That's not at all the case. There are peptides that work. GLP-1 agonists are really great peptides. They work. Some of the other peptides, BPC 157, probably works for a lot of people. The problem is, without the studies to show who do they work for, how many do they work for, what do the side effects really look like, we just don't know. And so we're sort of left in this space where the common peptides that are being prescribed a lot probably are pretty safe. Otherwise, we would know by now that, people are taking, BPC 157 and dying from it. That's not happening, right? But we really don't know about efficacy. And so you get these influencer docs or influencers who aren't docs, just making these claims about how these things all work and there's no side effects. And, that's just, first of all, it's never true. And secondly, there's no data to support those claims, but people seem to eat it up and just accept. And I guess where I'm going with this is the concern for me is that the doctors who don't take an evidence-based view of this and are prescribing these, among the general consumers, there is still this assumption that if a medical doctor prescribes it, it must be safe, right? And I can just tell you for sure from what I've seen out there, that is not the case.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know why it's spreading. Is it financial reasons? Is it just people want to ride a wave? They want to seem relevant?
Shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
And they're not being regulated. So it's easy to get access, right? I think that's really what's going on. It's certainly not because these things are miracle cures, right? I know a lot of people who've taken a lot of peptides. I've taken a few peptides myself. I can tell you these are not things that are going to be completely move the needle for most people, right? And so at best incremental, come with risks, particularly if you don't know where they're coming from, right? If they're coming from a compounding pharmacy and you don't know anything about that compounding pharmacy and your doc doesn't have a lot of experience with peptides, you're taking a risk. It might not even be the peptide itself. It could be what else gets put in there in the compounding.
Okay. I sometimes I like to imagine like 25 years from now, what we'll still be talking about. I guarantee 99% of the things that are super relevant now will not be talked about.
Yeah. I mean, by and large, peptides are a fad. There are a subset of peptides that have potent biological activities like GLP-1 agonists that actually do move the needle is my guess.
Okay. So I think that's it, right? Back to Seattle.
Right. So after Chicago, so that was over Halloween, and then back to Seattle Sunday. So I got in Sunday afternoon. Busy week of catch up. This is a problem when you travel, right? Everything gets compressed into the time you're back in the office. I think that week I got my data back from the Years Clinic in Berlin. So we talked in a prior episode about one of the stops when I was in Europe was at the Years Clinic in Berlin. That was the same weekend that I did the podcast episode with Andrew Steele, which is out now. Anyways, went through their comprehensive program, got that data back. Pretty interesting. They measured a lot. A lot of it overlaps with what we measure at OptiSpan. So it's nice I can have the comparison between the two. There's some interesting stuff in there. I think I mentioned my VO2 max was 49 point something. So I was right. It's 49.7 in that assessment. And that was on a bike, which surprised me. So anyways, I think I'll go through all that data at some point in an upcoming podcast. There's a few interesting things in there that are probably of value to talk about. And then that week recorded a podcast with Ben Blue from Aura Biomedical, got an update on the Million Molecule Challenge, some of the cool stuff that's come out of their data. I don't think that's out yet, but that'll probably be out before this episode airs. I think I also recorded an episode that week for the Home of Healthspan podcast with Andrew McConnell. So I'm not sure if that's out yet, but that'll be coming out as well.
What did you guys talk about?
That again was pretty broad. So a lot about healthspan medicine, the kinds of things that we measure, our philosophy or my philosophy around optimizing health. So didn't do a deep dive on the science for that one, if I recall correctly. And then that weekend was pretty cool. Put together our Heavenly Heat sauna. So that had been actually sitting in boxes in the garage for a couple of weeks because I'd been traveling, hadn't a chance to put it together. So Tammy and I, carved out a few hours on Saturday to assemble it. It only took us an hour. It was super easy to put together. It's a 2-in-1 indoor infrared and traditional heat sauna. So it took about an hour to put it together. The IR worked right out of the box. The traditional heater needs an electrician. So I think the electrician's coming out week after next to get that all hooked up. Boom. But you used it the first day. The IR part worked great. I think it got up to 160 something degrees Fahrenheit. Enjoying it so far. I personally haven't had a chance to use it very much because I've been traveling, but Tammy's been using it and she seems to really like it. So very pleased with that sauna so far.
Just curious, this is like being cheeky here, but what's your science longevity based sauna protocol in terms of duration and heat and all that?
Yeah, I don't have one. I mean, again, look, I think the way I think about sauna is that there is an abundance of correlative evidence suggesting, mostly from Scandinavian countries, that regular sauna use is associated with improved health, right, in a variety of domains. And there are plausible ways that sauna could be beneficial for health. Again, I put it in the same sort of category as, a lot of these experimental things, like cold plunge, I'd put in the same category. Red light therapy, some reason to believe there could be and probably are benefits. Not going to be a major lever. Not going to be diet, exercise, sleep, relationships, stress management, right? So I don't spend a ton of time worrying about how to optimize my sauna experience. Again, if people want to do that, more power to you. I don't think we have enough data, and I don't think it's worth it to worry a lot about exactly what temperature, exactly when you're going to do it, how many minutes you're going to do it for. So my routine is going to be, when I want to go sit in the sauna for 20 minutes, I'm going to go sit in the sauna for 20
Perfect.
minutes.
At 160 degrees.
Whatever. Yeah. And again, I probably will try. I mean, again, I do think I want to make a dedicated effort to do sauna regularly and try to evaluate how it makes me feel. So, the way it will probably work out is after I get done exercising, I'm already out there in the garage. I'm already sweaty. I'll go in the sauna for 20 minutes, but we'll see. So that was Sunday. And then Monday, I left for the most recent trip, which was to Mauritius for the Mauritius Longevity Summit. But before that, Monday morning, I went and did a live TV interview for a local news channel, Como Channel 4, which was fun. So I haven't done a ton of live TV. So I got down to their studios at like 8 a.m. and did, it was a quick, maybe 10-minute segment, sit down and talked about mostly the dog aging project. And then I came to the office, spent the day in the office, and then went to the airport and got on a very long 30-hour itinerary to Mauritius.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I've actually never heard of Mauritius. Where's it at?
So Mauritius is an island off the east coast of Africa. So it's just east of Madagascar, in the Indian Ocean, small island, maybe, I don't know, 60 miles end to end. It's not a perfect, circle or square, but that gives people an idea of how big it is. So not huge, kind of like the size of some of the Hawaiian islands. Also got a pretty similar geography and climate, I think, to the Hawaiian Islands. So anyways, the organizers of the conference, Nadine and Damien Adam, I think did a really fantastic job. And they, along with Martin O'Dea, who runs the Dublin Longevity Summit, invited all the speakers. Again, got another really fabulous venue. I think it's called the Trianon Convention Center in Mauritius. Really high quality speakers. Brian Kennedy was there, and it was great. It was a great conference. Again, it was interesting. So it was more of a scientific conference than a lot of the recent alternative medicine sort of field conferences that I've been at. Even though there were a lot of docs there. So that was interesting. And then it was a lot of fun. So left Seattle, 30-hour itinerary, 8-hour layover in Istanbul, got into Mauritius, I don't know, it's probably like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Got a rental car. They drive on the wrong side of the road there, which was fun. And then Brian and Kennedy and I got up early the next morning, like 4 a.m, to go do a hike called Le Morne Brabant. So people should check it out if you're interested. It was one of my favorite hikes I've ever done. It was so much fun. So like the first half of it is really easy, well-maintained trail. So first thing is we get there and there's like 2 guys at the trailhead, right? And they make you sign a release to start the hike. And so we're looking at each other like, that's not normal. And so anyways, the first half of it is really easy. And then the second half is like a scramble up, really, really not dangerous, but close to dangerous terrain. So I don't know, for people who've done Cathedral Rock in Sedona, it's kind of like Cathedral Rock after you get off the actual trail. If you've climbed around at the top there, it's kind of that sort of scrambling. So you can get yourself in trouble if you're not careful. As long as you're careful, you're going to be fine. So anyways, It was super fun. Just the right degree of difficulty. I was a little worried whether Brian was going to make it to the top.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you. So we know your VO2 max is elite, for your age and everything. Could he keep up? Was he pretty good? He
couldn't keep up, but he did good. We made it. We made it.
Yeah.
The only reason I was really worried about whether we were going to make it or not was because Brian's talk was at 2 p.m. And this was like, it took us an hour and a half to get down there. And so we were always a little worried that he was going to be late to get to his talk. Because we couldn't go right from the hike to the convention center. We had to go all the way back to our hotel. So that, again, we're getting a little bit in the weeds, but the hike is at the southern end of Mauritius. Our hotel was at the far northern end, and the conference center was kind of in the middle. So logistically, we just weren't sure he was going to make it back in time for his talk, which made Martin quite nervous about whether we were going to make it. But we did. We got to the top. Amazing views. Brian did make it, and then we came back down, and he made it with about 45 minutes to spare for his talk. Yeah. So that was the first day of the conference. And then my talk was the second day. Overall, I thought the conference was again, it was really, it exceeded my expectations for sure. And, I felt like the content was really solid. Hopefully it accomplished what Nadine and Damien wanted to accomplish. They had like 600 people there, which again, Mauritius is not big. I think it's like 1.2 or 1.3 million people total. So a lot of doctors, it seemed like a lot of interest among the attendees. And I think we gave them a pretty grounded view overall of the state of the field. So that was pretty good.
Do you think, okay, this is really, we might be dumping this day, but like in early days of bodybuilding, there's all these bodybuilding competitions, and eventually Mr. Olympia took over and 6 main one. I feel like there's all these summits popping up everywhere. Do you think 10, 20 years from now, there'll be like an official longevity summit?
No, I don't think we'll get there, because that's not the way conferences typically work, like where there's one that's recognized as the one that everybody goes to. I mean, sort of it depends on how the longevity field evolves, because you're right in the sense they are popping up all over the place. It seems like there's a longevity conference every other day. They really run the gamut from science to medicine. And obviously there's conferences that are in between to, pop culture, right? Like you're seeing and I've never been to one of those ones where it's just, like influencers talking. Because to me, there's no value there. Like those people don't have they're not going to tell me anything I don't know. They're just going to say a bunch of stuff that's half truths, right? But yet those seem to be popping up as well, where you get, it's just like I guess I shouldn't be so dismissive, but I really don't understand why somebody would want to just go to a conference where you just listen to a bunch of people that you can hear on YouTube, and they're going to say the same thing that they say on YouTube. It's a celebrity thing, not a information thing. Maybe that's why you get to go see your celebrities in person, I guess. But to me, there's no value in that personally. But that's kind of where we're at. And it feels like every other week there's a new conference. I think that will change because, unfortunately, longevity right now is, it's just an extension of the sort of wellness movement, I guess. And so it's going to peak at some point, and then it's going to be the next thing, right? And then we'll return to where there's like the core quality important stuff, I think, is probably the way it's going to play out.
Yeah, I think you're probably right on that. So what talk did you get?
So again, it was pretty similar to my Geneva talk, although I framed it more. Martin asked me to give sort of an overview of the biology of aging, because this again is a crowd that probably hasn't heard a lot of this stuff. So I talked about, how the hallmarks of aging fit in, kind of like what we know, what we don't know, the importance of the geroscience concept, this idea that the biology of aging is the greatest risk factor and driver for most of the major causes of death and disability. And that if we can understand that biology, it gives us the opportunity to maintain health for a lot of people a lot longer, that it's a more effective approach than targeting individual diseases in isolation. The talk was recorded. So I'm putting out some clips on my Instagram channel if people want to hear it. I did talk about this idea of some common facts, some common fictions, the same sort of 3 fictions and 3 facts I talked about in my TEDx talk. Just gave brief sort of overviews of the field, and then talked about what we're doing at OptiSpan and our approach to healthspan medicine.
person. One thing you sent me that I thought was pretty cool is that your talk came up on the local news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I didn't realize that this had happened until somebody forwarded it to me after the conference. But yeah, apparently there was a reporter from the local newspaper there, and she wrote an article about my talk. And she again, this is where I'm just like, that's not what I said. But the title of the article is that expert slams exaggerated claims lacking data. Like, I don't think that's what I said, but apparently that was the take-home message that she got from it.
There's like a 90-second clip. Is that your entire interview with her?
Yeah. So after the meeting, I think it was actually the next day, Martin O.D. asked me if I would sit down for just a couple of questions with a woman who was at the conference. I didn't know it was a reporter from the newspaper. So I thought it was somebody who just had like a podcast or something. And she just asked me a couple of questions.
Okay. Sorry. So just quick refresher. What were the 3 facts and 3 fictions he did?
Right. So let me see if I can pull these out of my head. So fiction number 1 is that we are close to solving aging, right? And so the idea here, I mean, again, people who watch the podcast regularly, I'm sure have heard this, but obviously nobody knows, right? How, if we're going to get to this thing called longevity escape velocity, if that's going to happen, and if so, when. But I think if you look at the data, there's no evidence that we're getting close to solving aging. So these people who are claiming that this is, on the horizon, it's just not evidence-based. It's faith, and that's fine. You can, if you want to be religious about longevity, that's great. But if you want to be focused on data, it's hard to make a case that we're close to solving aging. And there are lots of ways to see that. I presented the evidence that if you look at our ability to extend lifespan in animals, we haven't gotten past a 50-year-old experiment on caloric restriction. So it's hard to make the case that we're getting closer and closer and closer to immortality. That's fiction number 1. Fiction number 2 is that aging has been reversed. And again, you will hear people talk about how aging has been reversed. This depends a little bit on how you define aging and how you define reversed. I like dictionary definitions. And so I think it's pretty safe to say we have never made an old person young again or an old mouse young again. And so I, in a somewhat provocative way, talked about Brian Johnson, showed a picture of him, said that it doesn't even pass the eye test that he's aging in reverse. He's not. And I showed pictures of David Sinclair's mice, which have been presented deceptively as if they are aging in reverse, and they're not even the same mice, and they're not even the same genetic background.
Okay. I had that question because I've seen that photo so many times. They're the same age, the mice, but they're different.
Different genetic background. Yep. And it is not an old mouse that has been made young again. So, yes.
I think people are programmed to seeing before and after photos. So
yep. That's what I mean by deceptive. It was clearly designed to mislead people into believing something that isn't true. So anyways, that was fiction number 2. And then fiction number 3 comes back to the clocks. The idea that it is a fiction that clocks measure biological age. You will hear people say this all the time. I know most of the people saying this know the clocks don't measure biological age. It's shorthand. And I get it because it is cumbersome to say, the clocks are estimating biological age, or they're an indirect, correlation to a correlation to biological age. I think for, in certain contexts, it's okay to, if you're trying to communicate the concept that these things are measuring biological age, although even there it's probably better not to say that. But in scientific meetings or in the literature, I think it's very problematic that scientists are saying, we measured biological age. There's a couple of problems here. One is you will go to a conference and you'll hear, 5 different talks where 5 different people said they measured biological age, and they each used a different test and they each got different answers. How can you measure the same thing 5 different ways and get 5 different answers, right? And so it just confuses the heck out of people. So I really tried to make the clear point that what the clocks are actually measuring, and it depends on the clock, but for the epigenetic clocks, they're measuring methylation state for a subset of sites in the genome, average methylation state in blood. That's correlated to something else, usually either chronological age, mortality risk, or in some cases, change in health over time. So the measurement is epigenetic state, right? Average methylation state. The correlation is to chronological age or risk of dying. Those things are each correlated to biological age. That's why I say it's a correlation to a correlation. And then again, sort of just made it up on the fly, which is sometimes like, this is funny because when I give talks, I honestly half the time don't know what's going to come out of my mouth.
Wow.
So as I'm saying what I just said to you, I thought to myself, I was like, oh, we could make a drinking game about this. Every time somebody at this meeting says measured biological age. So I said, I know, because Brian was right up after me. He had 2 talks, and his second talk was about the lineage test, which is actually a really good test. But I knew he was going to say we measure biological age. And so I was like, so I don't know if it's a good idea, but I said something along the lines of, and Brian's going to be up right after me. And, if it wasn't 9 a.m. and this wasn't a longevity conference, I'd propose that we have a drinking game here. Every time Brian says we measured biological age, you get to take a drink. And we'd all be hammered by the end of Brian's talk. And so then Brian came up and gave his talk, and I could tell every time he started to say measured biological age, he thought about it, right? And he was trying to come up with different ways to say it. So it wasn't really fair to Brian, but we're good friends, so we can get away with it. So anyways, that was fiction number 3. Fact number 1, aging is a modifiable biological process. All that means is that aging is biology. It's under genetic and environmental control, and we know enough about aging to be able to change the rate of aging in laboratory animals. Caloric restriction, rapamycin, senolytics, right? These are tools we can use to slow biological aging. And when we do that, we increase lifespan and we preserve health later into life. Fundamentally, I think this is a concept that probably everybody watching the podcast or listening to the podcast understands, but the vast majority of the general public, I think, still does not understand that aging is a biological process and we can slow it down or speed it up. Optimally, we want to slow it down, but you can do things to your body that will also accelerate your aging process. So that was I think the key take home there. Fact number 2, that targeting aging, so modifying biological aging, is much more effective than waiting until people are sick and trying to treat their disease. So again, it's really the, medicine 2.0 versus healthspan medicine paradigm, right? Medicine 2.0, typically we focus on curing diseases. We fail at curing diseases in most cases, so we treat symptoms, but it's reactive. If we're able to target biological aging to keep people healthier longer, that's just a much more effective approach. And lots of ways you can quantitatively show that in terms of effects on life expectancy, economic gain you get from doing that, all of those things. And then fact number 3, we know enough today to start to do that, right? So there's a lot we don't understand about the biology of aging, but we know enough that we can start to have a positive impact on health span and potentially lifespan outside of the laboratory in the real world. And I talked about, 2 of the initiatives that I've been working on, which is the Dog Aging Project, so doing that in companion dogs, and OptiSpan, and how we're trying to bring a geroscience perspective to healthspan medicine.
Great. So I think that's it. So yeah, awesome to have you back. Excited to...
It is great to be back. I am really looking forward to being able to have a routine and spend some time with Tammy and with the kids. Thanksgiving's coming up. So
get that Sega deload next week.
Yeah, it's going to be, I'm really like, I don't regret going to any of these things. I think they all had value, and I am grateful to be home and not be traveling for a while. And I have no intention of going anywhere in December unless we go to New York City for New Year's Eve. If we do that, I'll have more on that later.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Nick. It was fun. And thank you for watching the OptiSpan podcast.